Uh, Vinod, sir, I'm making you the host. Uh, Let me, yep,
Yes. Okay, Shirag. Thank you.
thank you, thank you.
Yeah, I think you can all see my screen. Can someone confirm?
Yeah, it's visible from my end. Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So, welcome audience to this webinar on decarbonization strategies for the oil and gas industry with three prime topics uh, in discussion, including CCUS, hydrogen, green economy with a pinch of ESG. So, can anyone just expand what is CCUS? It's a very buzzing word right now. Anyone? So CCUS is expanded in this manner: carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So we want to capture carbon first, then explore mechanisms or pathways to utilize it, and then we will try to store it. So now there is also something else coming in. It's already there, which is CCS, not CCUS. So CCS is that thing that we don't utilize, we directly store it. Carbon capture and storage. So there are several sinks available for storing carbon dioxide as it is after we capture it. So we will try to see the principle behind this process. So the contents for the day would be we'll be trying to understand fossil fuels contribution to greenhouse gas emissions. Then we will try to look into greenhouse effect and its role in global warming. Also understand carbon footprint and carbon credit concepts. We will see decarbonization strategies. We will try to understand the fundamental of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Then we will look at how we can integrate renewable energies with this uh, coming transition. And we will also look at collaboration and policy support, like from where do we need support, from what domains and from what managerial levels. And also we will try to dive into principles, components, and defining ESG goals, which is environmental, social, and governance. Okay. So first, let's understand the contribution of fossil fuels to climate change and global warming. So fossil fuels and emissions. Generally, when a liter of petrol or diesel burns, that is what we use in our vehicles, it releases some gases, which include carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases like sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. There are a lot of uh, greenhouse gases, among which one is water vapor. So these gas emissions from different pathways around the world are trapped, and these actually trap heat in the atmosphere, leading to a warming effect known as greenhouse effect. So initially, there's a layer forming in the stratotropoionosphere when it reaches that height from the surface of the Earth. So this disrupts Earth's energy balance, contributing to global warming. So what is happening is there is a thin layer of uh, warming which doesn't reach the sun. So whatever emissions we are, emitting is reflecting back onto the surface of the Earth. That's what is happening. So current uh, increased temperatures in several countries is due to this reason. This increased GHG concentrations, which are greenhouse gas concentrations, lead to rising global temperatures, melting ice caps, rising sea levels, and extreme weather events. So water vapor, CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, ozone, these trap heat in the atmosphere by absorbing long wave radiation. So you can see, right? So when sun is emitting uh, rays onto the earth, after which we are again emitting several greenhouse gases, which are again reflecting back onto the earth's surface, like CO2, methane, CFCs, which is chlorofluorocarbons, ozone, and nitrous oxide. So short-wave solar radiation enters into the atmosphere and warms the Earth's surface. Correct. The Earth emits long-wave infrared radiation, which is absorbed by greenhouse gases and re-emitted, warming the surface and lowering the atmosphere and the lower atmosphere. So if there is an excess generation of greenhouse gases, mainly from human activities, this amplifies the greenhouse effect, leading to global warming. So globally, the temperatures are rising. That is what global warming is. So what is the difference between greenhouse effect and global warming? While the greenhouse effect is natural and necessary, excess GHGs lead to global warming, causing climate disruption. So now let's look at the global warming potential of different GHGs. See on the right, you can see a table with atmospheric concentrations of GHGs, pre-industrial period and recent period. So CO2 has a concentration of 280 ppm before 1750. ppm is parts per million. It is actually a milligram per liter. Okay. So CO2 was having this much concentration before 1750, but now it has increased to 365 ppm. Methane from zero point 0.7 to 1.745. Nitrous oxide from 0.27 to 0.314. And perfluoromethane, which is CF4, is from 40 ppt to 80 ppt. ppt is parts per thousand, which is gram per liter. And sulfur hexafluoride, previously it was 0, now it is 4.2 ppt, parts per trillion. It's milligram per kiloliter. Yeah, mg per kl, not liter, sorry. So this was examined for a atmospheric lifetime of 50 to 200 years, and the highest for sulfur hexafluoride of 30 to 100 years. So methane has a higher GWP due to its strong heat absorption, but shorter atmospheric lifetime. You can say atmospheric lifetime is shorter in methane. Yes, 12 years. Then nitrous oxide has a very high global warming potential and stays in the atmosphere for over 100 years. That is what is atmospheric lifetime means. The time period it stays in the atmosphere after reflecting back on the surface of the earth. Then CFCs and HFCs, some of the highest GWP gases used in industrial process and contributing significantly to climate change. Importance is that we can measure the overall warming impact of a gas compared to CO2 over 100 years. So CO2 is not just a culprit. There are other gases which are also the culprits. So let's now understand carbon footprint and carbon credit. So carbon footprint is the total amount of greenhouse gases emitted by human activities like transportation, energy consumption, measured in CO2 equivalents. But carbon credit is a market-based system allowing individuals or companies to offset their emissions by investing in environmental projects. So one credit equals 1 metric ton of CO2 saved or reduced. So projects include renewable energy integration. We want to shift towards that, which are low carbon fuels or no carbon fuels or zero carbon fuels. We will use them. Hydrogen is one example. Then we can also go for reforestation. So generally trees absorb CO2. They take in CO2 and release oxygen. That is what we are learning from childhood. So reforestation can also help reduce CO2 presence in the atmosphere. So link between the two, reducing a carbon footprint can be achieved by purchasing carbon credits, which incentivize sustainable practices. So we reduce carbon footprint so that we automatically get carbon credit. That is what is the link between the two. So currently, many companies like ADNOC onshore, offshore in UAE, Saudi Aramco, they are all having research centers in CCUS because they want to get carbon credits. That is for a sustainable future. So what can be decarbonization strategies on a whole? One can be renewable energy integration, where we incorporate renewable energy sources, just wind, solar power to reduce reliance on fossil fuels like crude oil, natural gas. And we can also go for carbon capture and storage, where we implement carbon capture and storage technologies to trap and store CO2 emissions from industrial process, especially in depleted reservoirs, oil and gas reservoirs, and saline aquifers. So these two can be the excellent sinks for storing CO2. Okay. So in process, source is what it emits, that has resource and that goes to sink. So these sinks can be depleted oil and gas reservoirs and saline aquifers. And of course, to improve energy efficiency, we can enhance energy efficiency in operations through advanced technologies and of course optimize processes. So we need to know how much we should recover to reduce the carbon footprint. And of course, achieve a decarbonized environment. Also, methane emission reduction. So reducing methane emissions through improved detection and repair of leaks in infrastructure of oil and gas. Generally, there is a lot of methane emissions, especially from flaring. So every company has a flaring system where whenever the gas and oil, when it is not being sold, especially gas, it will be flared into the atmosphere. So you can see it's a flaring system that is given here. If you can stop this, that can limit your methane emission into the atmosphere as it is, and we can get a reduced carbon footprint. Now let's understand what is carbon capture. So carbon capture refers to a set of technologies designed to capture CO2 emissions produced from industrial process, power generation, or other human activities. So we'll capture CO2 first. We should separate that from other gases in the flue gas stream. Generally, uh, your industrial process emit flue gases as a result of combustion. So this combustion product contains a lot of gases, including CO2 and H2. So the goal is you need to separate CO2 from that flue gas. We can use absorption, membrane separation, or cryogenic process. I can see some comments. Norman Ahmad, capture utilization storage technology aims to reduce CO2 emissions from various sources. Yes, you're right. Exactly. Then we'll try to transport this captured CO2 in a compressed form. So we will liquefy this as per the compressibility of CO2 as a gas, often via pipelines or ships or tankers, to a suitable storage site or location for use, which is a sink. Then we will store or utilize it. So CO2 is either stored underground in geological formations, in storage, or used in industrial process like enhanced oil recovery or the production of chemicals, because CO2 is also is a important chemical for production of several chemicals. So this is the entire process: production, capture, compression, injection, and storage. So between this, we need to separate CO2. Separation. It's quite important. Okay. Between capture and compression. Then we store CO2. So the first and foremost point is understand the storage capacity at the sink where we are storing. So the first and foremost topic of discussion in the actual course would be calculate the storage efficiency or storage capacity of the sink we are choosing. So we'll deal all that in the actual course after we start. So let's now understand utilization of CO2. So how is actually CO2 being utilized as a enhanced oil recovery agent? So EOR is called as enhanced oil recovery, where we inject CO2 into the reservoir rock of an existing oil field to recover more oil and natural gas. So when we inject CO2, CO2 forms a miscible zone with the oil bank. Okay. So this miscible zone can be attained in two ways. One is through FCM or MCM. So FCM is first contact miscibility. MCM is multi-contact miscibility. So these actually are a part of two dry mechanisms or two driving scenarios, which is condensing and vaporizing. So generally CO2 is a rich hydrocarbon gas. It's a part of flue gas. It is rich. So we will try to condense the oil zone or vaporize the oil zone. So that which is the miscibility, which is either FCM or MCM. Generally, MCM has two things. One is condensing and the other is vaporizing. So we will look at everything in the actual course where we look at ternary phase diagrams. We see, I'll just give a glimpse. So ternary phase diagram is that diagram which allows us to understand where we achieve miscibility. So this is lean gas, this is intermediate, this is rich. So we have a zone of, phase of miscibility like this. And if you have a composition of CO2 at this zone, we achieve a two-phase region, and then we try to come into single-phase region. That is what we do actually in reservoir engineering studies of understanding how the CO2 can be a potential uh, gas or potential fluid for achieving CO2 EOR, miscible and immiscible. So the injected CO2 trades places with oil that is released from minute pore spaces within the reservoir rock. This exchange results in CO2 becoming trapped by capillary pressure within this same pore space, dissolving in residual fluids present in the pore space, or eventually becoming mineralized. The trapping of CO2 during the EOR processes is incidental to primary purpose of producing oil. So we inject CO2 which encounters trapped oil and pushes that to the oil bank, which comes to the producer. So we inject CO2, then we inject water, then we again inject CO2 to have that pressure, and then we inject dry water. So CO2 miscibility only occurs at one pressure called as MMP. MMP, which is minimum miscibility pressure. So don't worry, we will deal all of this in the course. Okay. What is MMP? How do we calculate it from swelling tests? There are a lot of few tests to calculate MMP to understand the suitability of using that CO2 as a potential fluid for enhanced recovery in any field we are looking at. Okay. So this is how utilization comes and actually is built over time. Now let's look at storage. So in storage, we have four different mechanisms, trapping mechanisms like mineral trapping, solubility trapping, residual trapping, and structural trapping. The basic trapping mechanism is structural trapping, where we inject CO2, and this CO2 will try to move up due to buoyancy. So CO2, since it is liquefied and compressed already, and at the reservoir conditions, especially the reservoir is depleted. So what happens is your CO2 comes again as gas, and this CO2, due to buoyancy, having less density as compared to the reservoir fluid, will try to move up, due to buoyancy. We will see how it moves up in the next slide. So this forms a zone of CO2 at the top. So your cap rock will be a primary trap to not allow CO2 to migrate further. So this migration of CO2 from injection well towards the crust is called as plume migration. So CO2 plume migration. So structural trapping is the basic trapping, which is also called as structural or hydrodynamic trapping. Then comes solubility trapping, where we will try to achieve solubility between CO2 and in situ reservoir fluids due to natural convection. So this has mainly happening. This mainly happens in saline aquifers, where your CO2 can be dissolved in salt water, which is saline water, due to natural convection. Then comes mineral trapping, where your CO2 reacts with minerals in the reservoir, like calcite, quartz, siderite, dolomite, and they try to achieve miscibility, and that will be trapped as a residue. Then comes residual trapping, where CO2 forms a residue of several banks within the saline aquifer, and will try to be trapped. You can see CO2 being trapped as residues. Okay. So if you look at the right, there is a picture where your structural trapping uh, can can contribute up to 100% in a very short period of 10 years, less than 10 years. But mineral trapping takes the longest. It takes up to 10,000 years to be trapped, efficiently. That too with a contribution of around 40% only. So researchers are trying to now explore mineral trapping avenues where uh, even the contribution is less, in the long term, it is quite appreciable and effective. Okay. So we will also look at a study, simulation study in the actual course, which I have it personally, and I'll be sharing that to you to understand plume migration, especially, and structural and stratigraphic trapping. So now we will understand the physics behind plume migration. You can see there is an injection well which is being injected, this CO2 migrates towards the crust due to buoyancy. So what is that buoyancy? How is it actually helping migration? Sure, capillary pressure is 2 sigma, which is gamma here, cos theta by r, and your buoyancy pressure, which is density of water minus density of fluid, which is density of carbon dioxide, into G into H. So what happens is the zone of stability achieves when these both will be equal. So when I equate PC and PB, I can find my height of CO2 plume. So 2 sigma cos theta by r will be equal to delta rho GH. You can see H is now 2 sigma cos theta by r delta rho G. So this is your height of CO2 plume. So capillary pressure is nothing but capillary entry pressure. This is capillary entry pressure where your CO2 will try to enter the smallest possible capillary of radius r. So when this capillary entry pressure comes equally to buoyancy pressure, then your CO2 plume migration starts, and the height of plume will be a function of sigma, which is the surface tension between CO2 and rock, and also IFT between CO2 and water, and it is the contact angle. The R is the radius of capillary, delta is the density difference between the in situ fluid and CO2, and G is the acceleration to gravity. So that is how your plume migration height is calculated in any simulation software. Okay. So we'll understand what is this height, and this height should not exceed the cap rock, uh, the thickness of the reservoir, right? If it exceeds, then there can be a leakage of CO2. That is another risk due to CO2 migration. So analytically, we estimate the height of CO2 plume, and then we go for numerical simulation. So when we integrate this with, when we look into renewable energy integration, so one thing can be solar energy usage, wind energy integration, bioenergy applications, apart from geothermal and hydrogen. So solar energy, where we utilize solar power for various operations, which helps in reducing carbon emissions and supports sustainable energy practices. Because solar energy is a low carbon or zero carbon fuel. Then wind energy integration, where we integrate wind energy into extraction, processing, and distribution activities that can help decrease the industry's carbon footprint. And also bioenergy for operations in industries can significantly lower carbon emissions and promote renewable energy usage. Like there are many biofuels. So the main thing is investment. So current oil and gas operations are, even though they're costly, they're actually being practiced from lot of period of time. But now these renewable energies are cost ineffective. So one thing is access to finance. So this is hampered by difficulties in securing funding for innovation, manufacturing, and infrastructure. The main thing is infrastructure. The way we look at pipeline construction based on production profile, the same thing comes in renewable energies, which is infrastructure. It's quite costly. And also, most renewable energy patents are filed in high income countries, indicating a gap in innovation. Also, capital flows, like developing economies like excluding China and India, receive significantly less investment for clean energy projects. Local conditions, attracting investment depends on macroeconomic strength, where population is a main deciding factor, state capacity, governance, and stability of policy. That is why we want to explore ESG also. Cost of capital, the composite weighted average cost of capital indicates higher risks and costs for developing countries, especially for countries having lower GDPs, gross domestic product per capita. Increased burden, the financial strain of building clean infrastructure slows progress in lower income economies, right, which have lower GDPs. So collaboration, one thing can be with stakeholders, where we invite stakeholders between governments, NGOs, and industries, and is crucial for achieving successful decarbonization efforts and creating sustainable future. Where infrastructure is at a single point, and we try to collect sources from several points. Supportive policies and regulations, that these should support green technologies and sustainable practices, and are essential for driving the industry towards decarbonization. And incentives for green technologies. So incentives is very important, where we get carbon credits, and adoption of green technologies can greatly accelerate the industry's transition towards sustainability. Then cross sector partnerships, where partnerships across different sectors are vital for creating holistic solutions and driving the industry towards a more sustainable future. Obvious. So that is how we conclude the first three topics, and we enter into the last topic of discussion, which is ESG. environmental, social, and governance. So it's nothing but a framework used to assess an organization's business practices and performance on various sustainability and ethical issues. It also provides a way to measure business risks and opportunities in those areas where social and environmental is also already included. So in capital markets, some investors use ESG criteria to evaluate companies and determine their investment plans, a practice known as ESG investing. So as an investor, I try to look at ESG criteria of that company to take it over or no. While sustainability, ethics, and corporate governance are generally considered to be non-financial performance indicators, so ESG initiatives also contribute to broader business sustainability efforts that aim to position companies for long-term success based on responsible corporate management and business strategies. Now let's look at the three things of ESG. One is environmental, which include environmental factors of an organization, overall effect on the environment, and the potential risks and opportunities. So the components can be energy consumption and efficiency, carbon footprint calculation, including greenhouse gas emissions of that industry or sector, that is where companies are operating, waste management, air and water pollution, biodiversity losses, deforestation impact, and also natural resource depletion. So, what are the prime indicators between from this seven, indicative measures point of view? That is what environmental part looks into. Then social, which include factors. Social factors addresses how a company treats different groups of people and its social impact, including employees, suppliers, customers, and community members. So the criteria used include the following examples like fair pay for employees, including a living wage, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs like male to female ratio, employee experience and engagement, workplace health and safety, community relations, including organizations' connection to and impact on the local communities in which it operates. So, what are their CSR initiatives, corporate social responsibility? Then, funding of projects or institutions that help poor and undeserved communities, and support for human rights and labor standards. So, these come into social aspects. Then, governance, they examine how a company policies itself. So, companies' leadership and management, board composition, including its diversity and structure, executive composition policies, financial transparency and business integrity, regulatory compliance, and risk management. This is quite important. Ethical business practices, and what are the rules on corruption, bribery, conflicts of interest, and political donations and lobbying, also whistleblower policies. So these three integratedly form ESG, which is quite important and has a connection with our existing topic of discussion. So these goals are that will which will tell us the connection between the two. So ESG initiatives typically require an extended period to see a return on investment. Of course, long-term projects, thus achieving net zero emissions, can take several years. So establishing ESG needs is quite important. The organization should first conduct a baseline assessment to evaluate its current needs. So the key areas for ESG frameworks include greener data centers, sustainable supply chains, carbon offsetting, or net zero emission pledges. So this is how we connect ESG with our topic of discussion, which is decarbonization. Setting goals. These goals should align with business strategies and to be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound. Also, responsibilities is quite important, which helps ensure accountability. Timeline for achieving goals. So these terms can be short or 1 or 2 years, medium or 3 to 5 years, and long or 5 years plus. And measure and adjusting. Once implemented, the organization should keep track of performance and make periodic adjustments as needed. So that is how ESG goals are defined. So coming into this course content on a whole, so day one we will look at decarbonization in oil and gas. Then day two we'll explore carbon capture, utilization, storage concepts and phenomena. Then day three we look at hydrogen economy. Day four renewable energy integration, the other low carbon fuels, and day five on ESG principles and updates. So yeah, I think I'm done. Any questions you can just ask me. Anyone? Anything you want us to include in the course, you can just let us know. We'll be happy to incorporate that.
Yeah, dear participants, we do have 5 more minutes. The question, you
Yes,
are
yes.
free to toss any questions or anything or to interact with Mr. Vinod sir, and to know more about the same. Yeah.
Okay, I think we can end it here. Yeah, thank you for joining. Uh, let's meet in the course. All the best.
Okay. Thank you, Vinod sir, and thank you, dear participants. So I think you can end the meeting, sir, as you are the host.
Ah, okay.